Hello and welcome to Sports Insider on cleveland.com. I am Dan Labbe with Chris Fedor. We have a packed show. We're going to touch on all things Cleveland and Columbus sports today. We're going to talk Browns with Mary Kay Cabot. Then we're going to actually talk some Ohio State football with Doug Lesmerises right after that. And then we will talk LeBron and Cavaliers with Joe Vardon to wrap up the show. But Chris, let's get right to it. Let's bring on our Browns beat reporter Mary Kay Cabot as the Browns getting ready to play the Oakland Raiders. And Mary Kay, it would have been laughable a couple weeks ago to think that this would be a huge game for the Browns, but then they went to Jacksonville, laid that egg, and here we are, Browns facing a really important game again against a winless team.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, who would have thought that they would lose to the Jaguars? I really did not think that was going to happen. So now, I guess I have a little bit of doubts about whether or not they are actually going to be able to beat the Raiders, too. The Raiders have lost to some good teams. The Browns are banged up on defense, although they might possibly get Reuben back this week. But, for the most part, I just think that it still is going to be a tough game for them.
When it comes to the game against Jacksonville this past weekend, Mary Kay, based on being in the locker room all week, what lessons have the Browns learned from that loss?
Well, I do think that we're hearing a lot of talk about things like they wanted it more. We heard that from Terrence West yesterday. Brian Hoyer, the same thing, basically saying, now we really understand we have to prepare for every team like they are the best team in the NFL. So those are the kinds of things, that you're hearing. And I do think that there was a little bit of a letdown after beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's easy to get up for Ben Roethlisberger, home game, everything's kind of on your side. But then to go on the road, and obviously they've struggled on the road this year, and, to go against a rookie quarterback and a winless team, I do think they lacked a little bit of something going into that game. And they have to find it this game for sure.
Mary Kay, the running backs have been in the news all week. Of course, there was that the Terrence West situation on Sunday, and now they've all kind of spoken here. Do you expect to see a different approach to how the running backs are used on Sunday?
Yes, I actually do. Coach said yesterday that he's not locked into the three-headed monster type of thing, which I think is good. I think they kind of need to let the guys get into the flow. If they're actually saying that themselves and being public about that, then there is something to it, and they need to listen. And, all you have to do is look and see that something's amiss. So, yeah, I think they'll go with more of a two-man rotation. And I would have to think that since Terrence West, was benched the week before and then benched again this game, that he would probably be the one to lose the rest.
Do you think there's some truth to what Terrence West has been saying, Mary Kay, about, I know that I'm only going to get a limited number of snaps, a limited number of carries, so I feel like I have to hit a home run every single time I touch the ball?
Yeah, I think he was exactly right in what he said. And, I think that, that's been a common theme for him, going all the way back to training camp, that he feels like he has to do too much, Take the 2 yards, take the 3 yards when you can get them. His average in this past game was 1.6 because he was trying to do too much. So he has to learn that lesson, and he's got to watch some film. He's got to watch some other backs. He's got to realize what it takes to find that hole and hit it as quickly as he can. Now this past game, I think they had issues too with some of the blocking and some of the protection because of the offensive line shift. With John Greco and Paul McQuiston in there. Again, it's not Alex Mack in the middle of your defense, and so I do think that's a factor. But, Terrence has to maybe take a step back and learn a little bit.
In the long run, Mary Kay, is this going to be good for Terrence West? Because he came in, he was in that running back competition with Ben Tate. Nobody was talking about Isaiah Crowell back in training camp, and people were talking about Terrence West maybe stealing Ben Tate's job, and now here we are, 6 weeks into the season, and he's all of a sudden third on the depth chart.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing that can happen, especially when you're running a run the zone blocking scheme like this. There's a lot of guys that if they're suited to it, one cut and go type of runners that can excel in this type of thing. And the Browns also have Glenn Winston waiting in the wings to step in there and bring himself on the NFL. So, Isaiah is well suited to the scheme, and he's very explosive, and I think that it was odd that he was the third running back off the bench. And I just think maybe it did have something to do with the fact that he had some ball security issues in the previous game. Everyone has said no, but I don't know. It was just weird that Terrence went into the game ahead of him.
Mary Kay, Dan and I talked about this on Monday, and Brian Hoyer has talked about this. Maybe it was just one bad game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Do you believe that, or do you think that Jacksonville showed other teams around the NFL a blueprint for slowing down the Browns' offense and, most importantly, attacking Brian Hoyer?
Yeah, I think they did. I think they did put the blueprint out there, and now again, it's going to be up to the other teams, obviously starting with Oakland, to see if they can follow that blueprint. I mean, you have to have. The Jaguars came into the game with 19 sacks, which was tied for second in the NFL. So it's not like they just did something that they weren't never able to do before. They can rush the passer, and they can get sacks. And they did that, and they seized upon that, especially with 2 changes on the offensive line. Can Oakland do the same kinds of things? I don't know if their front is as stout or as dangerous as the Jaguars, but they will certainly try. They'll try to shut down that run and take the Browns out of their play-action game and not always be peeking in the backfield and biting on the run. And if they don't do that, it gives them an opportunity to cover someone else that Brian is trying to throw to in his progression.
Mary Kay, how concerning is it that the run defense seemed to regress again on Sunday? And we saw a lot of the same things we've been seeing all season. We didn't see against Pittsburgh. Missed tackles, big running lanes. Denard Robinson had 127 rushing yards, a career high. How concerning is that?
Well, it's a huge concern, and it's been a problem all season long, and it hasn't gotten any better with each guy that goes down in that defense. You lose Phil Taylor, you lose Ataba Rubin, Armonte Bryant, Billy Wynn. The defense has been under a tremendous strain with so many key guys on the front out injured. I mean, there's just no two ways about it. Your 2 best run stuffers, Phil Taylor and Ataba Rubin, being out, that really, really hurts. And don't underestimate the contributions Billy Wynn makes when he's in there either. So, yes, they have been hurting that way. And I don't know if it's just poor tackling as much as it is right now. Just kind of an ability or talent thing. They don't have their top guys out there, and it's showing.
Mary Kay, hypothetically, you could pick one of these guys to have back this season for the Browns. You can have Josh Gordon, who's slated to come back here in the near future, or you could have Alex Mack. Who do you pick and why?
Oh, that's a great question, Chris. That is a really, really good question. Wow. Tough one. You know what? I'm almost thinking Alex Mack because oh boy. Because I do think that the way that their offense is set up, it's predicated on running the football, protecting the passer, and then hitting the open man. And you can find an open man such as a Taylor Gabriel or an Andrew Hawkins and a Miles Austin, Jordan Cameron, and make big players, big play guys out of those guys if you have the protection up front in the running game to do it. So I'm going to say Alex Mack.
All right, Mary Kay, before we let you go, we got to ask about the quarterbacks. Brian Hoyer, coming off of his worst game, really, since he's taken over for the Browns, even going back to last season. If he struggles against Oakland, are we going to see number 2 out there?
Well, you know what? I think there's a chance that we're going to see number 2, even if Brian doesn't struggle. You know what? At home, Mike Patton always talks about they control the volume in their own stadium. And one of the best ways to pump up the volume in Cleveland Browns Stadium or First Energy Stadium is to throw Johnny football on the football field. So I think there's a chance that they'll use him anyway. But for sure, if they need a spark, I think it would be the way to go, and everyone should probably look for that on Sunday.
All right, Mary Kay Cabot joining us here on Sports Insider. Thanks for the time, Mary Kay.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Johnny Manziel, the talk is back. We got it quieted for what, about a week and a half, and now here we are talking about Johnny Manziel again. You and I talked about that question, the Alex Mack, Josh Gordon question, before we came on, and we both said Alex Mack as well.
Mm-hmm. I think so, because I think when you look at how the Browns want to attack defenses, what they need is they need that solid offensive line and they need that running game to go. And I think when you talk about Brian Hoyer and some of his strengths and some of his weaknesses, if Brian Hoyer doesn't have a running game, Brian Hoyer becomes an average to below average quarterback. And that was shown against Jacksonville last week. It's been that way all season long, but the difference is he's always had that running game to lean on. Even in the comeback against Tennessee, Dan, Brian Hoyer made a lot of throws, really good throws, some of them to Travis Benjamin, but it was the running game that helped them get back into it in the second half. Look at the Steelers' comeback in Week 1. It was the running game that helped the Browns get back into it. So when you took the running game away from Brian Hoyer against Jacksonville, he wet himself. He needs that running game. He needs that offensive line in front of him. I would rather have Alex Mack, a guy who is needed, than Josh Gordon, a guy who I look at as a luxury right now.
And even in that game against Pittsburgh, it was a perfect setup for Brian Hoyer. He only had to make 8 passes, or complete 8 passes to win that game.
That's right.
He threw the ball 17 times. That's perfect. That's a perfect formula. All right, let's go ahead and switch gears, talk Ohio State football, and bring in one of our Ohio State beat reporters, Doug Lesmerises, joining us. Doug, welcome.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing well. The Buckeyes getting ready for Penn State this week, a night game. It's going to be on national TV. It seems like this is a game Ohio State should win, but is this a game that Buckeye fans should be wary of?
No. No, I mean, wouldn't it be great to say yes? Like that Virginia Tech game was interesting. The Cincinnati game I thought going in might be interesting. It turned into a blowout, but Penn State is coming off a bye week. I think the only possible thing is if Penn State in the bye week revamped, said we're going to fix 10 different things that are going wrong. The main problem is that their offensive line is not very good right now. They've had some misses in recruiting in previous years. Those things are showing up right now. Christian Hackenberg, their very talented quarterback, has no time to throw. He has 5 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions this year. He has 5 touchdown passes the whole year. J.T. Barrett has 20. He's a talented quarterback. I just don't think he's going to have much of a chance against this Ohio State defense.
Okay, so when it comes to Ohio State, Doug, they're racking up points in bunches, over 50 points in 4 straight games. At the same time, I think a lot of people will say they haven't really played anybody. Now, is that fault of their own? No, not really. It's the way that the schedule has set up. But when you assess Ohio State compared to other teams around college football, Doug, how good is this Buckeyes team?
It is very hard to tell. And the question every week is this the opponent that's going to make it more difficult? Is this the opponent? We thought maybe Rutgers' defense would be a little bit better. Didn't matter. We think maybe Penn State's defense will be a little bit better. It's highly ranked against the run. Part of that is because you can have success throwing it. It's just life in the Big Ten. It's been this way for years. What did we really know about Ohio State when they went 12-0 in 2012? They were banned from the postseason. They didn't really play anybody. What do we know about them last year? They were undefeated. They were rolling at the end of last season, and then they lost their last 2 games. So, it's hard to tell. One thing I took away from last week, Rutgers was very thrown off by the up-tempo offense. They said they just could not handle the speed of that. That's like Oregon-esque kind of praise. It's not just the players, but it's the scheme. I do think it's possible the whole combination of what Ohio State is doing offensively is pretty good right now, maybe against anybody they would play.
When you look at the offense, like Chris mentioned, and you look at the up-tempo way Ohio State is playing, when Urban Meyer first got this job, I know a lot of fans and a lot of folks in the media said he's going to make Ohio State start to look like an SEC school. So far in his tenure, has he delivered on that promise?
Other Big Ten teams are saying that. That the speed with the skill position guys, you can look and you can see some speed on defense. Their linebackers are playing aggressively. They have some athletic guys on the defensive line. I think with the SEC, a lot of it is athletes on defense, the athletes on the defensive line, that you just don't have big guys there. You have big, quick, nimble guys there. They do have some of those guys like Joey Bosa. I think they're getting there. I think sometimes it's harder for the people who watch Ohio State every week to see it, because maybe we're used to it, but when you listen to the other Big Ten people who are playing other Big Ten teams and then they play Ohio State, it seems like those Big Ten people see a difference, and they are actually using the word SEC when they talk about Ohio State speed.
Doug, is J.T. Barrett a Heisman Trophy candidate?
I can't go there right now. I get in fights with people about, other people on the beat covering this team are talking about JT Barrett that way. You know, Terrell Pryor and Braxton Miller put up some big numbers for very successful teams and never got to New York. Sometimes there's only 3 Heisman finalists. It's a very small group. And when you talk about the undefeated teams that are left, have some Heisman candidates. Marcus Mariota is a Heisman candidate for Oregon. Amari Cooper at Alabama is doing everything a receiver can do. You know, you're basically saying, is J.T. Barrett one of the 3 to 5 best players in college football? J.T. Barrett has played great. His team is putting up big numbers. No, I'm not talking about him that way yet. I think we are a fairly long way from that. If we stay on this pace, I mean, is a quarterback whose team scores 50 points a game and he throws 4 touchdowns every game and his team wins every game, is that player X a Heisman candidate? I mean, probably. I don't want to just project that J.T. Barrett's going to do this every game, even though the last 4 games have been very good.
Doug, speaking of the Heisman, the reigning guy right now is Jameis Winston. Of course, everybody knows the story about Jameis and the off-the-field trouble that has surrounded him. If it goes through an entire season and he doesn't get suspended, he plays the entire season, can he be in the running again? Or should voters say, you know what, no, we have to look at who this guy is as a person along with who he is as a football player?
You know, the Heisman people have some wording in there that suggests that you should look at the totality of the person with this, which is a crazy thing. I mean, it's, you know, there's a public persona of somebody. There's the things you think you know. I mean, we've seen enough times in sports. You don't really know. I mean, it's like, who knows what guys are doing, but, you know, Jameis Winston has a lot of things come out publicly. I think whether it should be the case or not, you can debate that all year. I think there will be voter fatigue. There's too many things Jameis Winston has done in a negative fashion that people, I think, are tired of talking about that or tired of hearing about that. And I think if there are other candidates, I think he will have a very, very, very difficult time winning it again. And I would not be shocked if he didn't even get to New York, even if his stats are the same or better, just because I think it's going to be hard for people to write his name down.
Wow. Doug, last question here. Is Ohio State's playoff chance essentially beat Michigan State in a few weeks, win the Big Ten championship, and then cross their fingers?
Yes, that is a very good way to describe it. The first part of that, obviously, 100%, you have to do that or you're out. You know, one more loss and they're out. And then there are no guarantees. You know, if you could be in a situation where you could say, beat Michigan State, win the Big Ten championship, and you're in. Mm-hmm. You know, we could be in that world. We're not in that world, in my opinion. I think you have to have those things happen, but then you have to look at what happens in the SEC. Does Florida State win out? Notre Dame win out? What's the Pac-12 champ look like? I think you are in a cross-your-fingers situation still for the Buckeyes, even if they don't lose again.
All right, Doug Lesmerises joining us on Sports Insider. Thanks for the time, Doug.
Thanks, guys.
All right, and now we will switch gears once again, and we are going to talk Cavaliers basketball as we bring in part of our Cavs team, our LeBron reporter, Joe Vardon, joining us. Joe, I don't think we've had you on since your first day here.
Oh, I think it's been a little while, but you guys are men of many hats, so thanks for having me on.
I suppose. All right, preseason is in the books. LeBron played it.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, right. LeBron played it pretty safe in this preseason. Of course, sat out a few times. Is that going to carry over into the regular season as well? Is he going to play it fairly safe at times with his minutes and when he plays?
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to play into the regular season the way you saw in the preseason. He inflicted his will one time. It was against Indiana in Cincinnati. He had 26 points. If he would have played more, he'd have had a bunch more. There was nothing Indiana could do, and LeBron made it clear early on that was going to be how it was going to go. Otherwise, you're right. He has played it safe. He's tried to make sure other players have gotten involved, and he was kind of maintaining his own body. So I think you're going to see him take it up another level come Thursday.
And Joe and Dan, I like that approach because I think LeBron learned in Miami, being down there, just how important the others are. So many people talk about the big three with LeBron, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, but you need the others. You need Dion Waiters. You need Anderson Varejao. You need Tristan Thompson. And LeBron learned that in Miami, and I like the approach that he took this preseason.
Yeah, I did too, Chris. I think that's a great point because, I mean, he's a 4-time MVP, 2-time champion. He didn't need to go out there and average 25 a night in games that don't matter. It's almost like if you think about it from a spring training perspective, when you have a top-of-the-line rotation starter, he might go out there in his first start in February or March and throw all changeups. And then the next time you might throw all sliders, and then, another time work out of the stretch exclusively. That's kind of what I saw from LeBron. It was like he was working on specific parts of his game. He's there, he'll be ready to go.
I think that's one of the things that makes LeBron so interesting. I mean, there are some superstars out there who approach every single game, 82 games a year, like it's Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Yeah, and LeBron is more of a guy who kind of looks at the long term a little bit. Not to say that he doesn't approach every game like it's an important one, but he tends to be a little bit more aware of his mortality, I guess, and understand that he's got to save himself a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I suppose there are two schools of thought. I mean, if you think about a Michael Jordan, every opportunity for him was an opportunity to be great, if you will. And it's not that LeBron doesn't want to be great every time he plays, but he takes, as you said, Dan, the long view. 82 games is an incredibly long season. And that doesn't even count the month we just spent playing games that don't matter, and then 2 months of playoffs. So it takes forever. You need to be at your best towards the end. LeBron knows that, and that's the mentality that he takes.
Joe, so many people have compared this Cavs team to the Miami Heat from 2010. When Miami got together, their big three, they started off 9-8. They didn't have the chemistry. They didn't have the cohesiveness. They didn't know how all the pieces were going to fit. Right. Based on what you've seen so far this preseason, would you say that the Cavs are ready for October 30th against New York?
Well, Chris, I'm glad you brought that up. It's what I wrote about from the game Monday night in Columbus, is just this idea of cohesion and the idea of LeBron and Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love being these sort of superstars, and it's superstars who have to adjust when they play together. And that takes time. And as you brought up, it was part of the piece as well, the Miami Heat. I mean, 9-8 when LeBron showed up and first started playing with Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh. I mean, people would lose their minds in Cleveland if they started 9-8. And I don't think that's going to happen, to your question. I think that this team is further along than the Heat were because they have better players top to bottom. I also expect that there will be growing pains. I expect that there might be some early season losses that maybe when you went through the schedule and marked down what you thought would be a win and loss, that there'd be some surprises there. And it'll be interesting to see how first-year coach David Blatt handles that. It'll be interesting to see how much pressure is applied to the big three because of those losses and to the players that are sort of outside the big three. I mean, LeBron talked about during training camp how if we struggle, it's going to be Dion Waiters' fault. Yeah. And what he meant was the big three have kind of earned the benefit of the doubt, and so the blame just automatically will go to Dion, fair or not. So if they lose a couple and Dion jacks up a bunch of shots and people start pointing fingers at him, we'll see how he responds.
Is New York essentially the perfect opening opponent for this team? Because that's not a team they're going to have to come out of the gate and grind out like an 85-80 win against. They're going to be able to play, in the 110s, 120s.
They're playing Memphis.
Yeah.
I think it is perfect. I think for that reason, the New York media will be here. It's going to be an atmosphere probably unlike anything we've seen in the city of Cleveland. And so the Knicks are sort of the perfect running mate for that.
Yeah.
And they want to establish themselves in the East as well. I mean, they have players who feel like they have a lot left in the tank and they want to be in that conversation. So they will certainly be here to try to ruin the parade, if you will.
Joe, some people say Washington, some people say Toronto. Besides Chicago, is there another team that you think in the Eastern Conference can challenge the Cavs?
Well, I don't think there's another team that should challenge the Cavs. Mm-hmm. Whether or not there are teams who hang around for a while, I mean, a lot goes into that, and we've talked a lot about it already with the cohesion thing and camaraderie, and then, you never know what happens with injuries and that, but sure. No, what I saw from Chicago startled me because I was not prepared for Derrick Rose to be that quick and to just, I mean, he's back. He looks like he's back. And if he's back, that he brings an element that defensively the Cavs will have a real problem with in a 7-game series. And so if he stays healthy, then the Chicago Bulls are absolutely a formidable threat. Beyond that, I mean, you have a bunch of experience in Miami. I think you have some hunger and some swagger in Washington. You know, the Knicks, it's hard to imagine, but again, they do have Carmelo and they do have Amare, and, you know, they're playing under the umbrella of Phil Jackson for the first time. So there's some elements there. I mean, Indiana, they're just devastated with the Paul George injury, but they also have veterans and they have a good coach.
Ready for a sneaky team?
Uh-oh.
Charlotte.
Oh, Charlotte.
I'm not saying that they can beat the Cavs in a 7-game series,
They
but
can
got
make
to
it
the
difficult, though?
Got to the playoffs last year. Defensive-minded team. They've got a tough interior with Al Jefferson. They added Lance Stevenson to blow in LeBron's ear some more. So you got those things.
All right.
Look out.
Looking at the MVP,
Yeah.
you got to figure LeBron's going to lose some points with voters because he's got Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving. So let's say LeBron doesn't win the MVP. Who do you think is most likely to beat him out for that award?
I think,
I
think LeBron is the favorite because of this injury to Kevin Durant. He's just going to lose a lot of time. Like, he's going to lose like 2 months.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard for him. Even if he comes out and averages 30 points a game, it's in 2 less months than whatever LeBron does. And we're all expecting a huge year from LeBron. So I think going in, he should be the favorite to be the MVP.
Although I will say it seems every year you kind of go through these 2-month windows where a guy plays really well for a couple months and it's like, oh, that guy's the MVP, and then 2 months later it's somebody else.
Right.
So Kevin Durant could certainly still be in the running even with the injury.
What if Kobe Bryant comes out and just has a ridiculous year? Like, you know? What
Yeah.
if he somehow...
Just a chip on the shoulder.
Yeah,
year,
I mean, they hold his lower appendages together with duct tape, and he dominates. Then that would be something. But
There's one problem. Los Angeles stinks.
True.
Well, there's that.
And usually you have to win to get the MVP.
But no, I'm firmly in the corner of LeBron should be the MVP.
The other Los Angeles, though, has an MVP candidate.
They got a
Clippers.
couple.
They got a couple. Chris Paul, Blake Griffin. Blake could get it.
It's true. All right, that will do it for Sports Insider. Thank you to Joe Vardon for joining us, Mary Kay Cabot. Let us off with some Browns talk. Doug Lesmerises talked Ohio State. If you missed any of it, you can catch the archive a little later today at cleveland.com/sports. For Chris Fedor, I'm Dan Labbe. Thanks for watching.